Now, Stavros Karamperidis is an associate professor in maritime economics at the University of Plymouth in the UK, and he joins us live from Kavala in Greece. Thank you so much for joining us, Stavros. We've just heard from that captain of an oil tanker saying he's not optimistic that Donald Trump's planned so-called Project Freedom of escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz is actually feasible, and it's not a project he'd like to undergo, and he's forbidden to anyway.
Thank you very much, Richard, for having me. And yes, I've also heard what the captain said a minute ago. I think the captain has described correctly what's the process in any company. So every company will make a decision, and they will evaluate the risk of crossing through the Strait of Hormuz on a case-by-case basis. So what I would like to say is that, yes, it's going to be cautious, but I think that some companies, they will be willing to take the risk and cross through the Strait of Hormuz. We've seen, I think a week ago, when it was again another announcement, and some vessels, they have also crossed through the Strait of Hormuz. So I think the case is going to be on the individual company. And of course, as the captain said, you know, even if he gets instructions from the company, he has to be, because he's solely responsible for the safety of his crew in the vessel, to make the decision based on the information he has at the current stage. Of course, we don't have to forget, and I'm sure you mentioned that earlier on, that, you know, we're talking about 20,000 sailors been stranded there in the area, 3,000 vessels. So you can imagine, from the 3,000 vessels, some of them, they would like to take the risk.
Yeah, I mean, even if it turns out to be safe passage for some here, you know, insurance could nonetheless be the biggest deterrent.
Yes, insurance companies, as you know, they have skyrocketed since the beginning of the war. That's, of course, the other thing that each office has to clear up, and that's why I said, you know, the captain has to oblige to the directions that he's going to get from the office, because the first thing that the office is going to do in every company, they have to check if the insurance is covering the trip, how that insurance is covered, and all that kind of stuff. So it's a complicated issue. It's not something like black and white. It's very vague at the moment, and things are evolving as we talk. So I think each company will make the decision based on what kind of requirements they have in mind, how much stress the captain and the crew is under with, and of course, what kind of risk they're willing to take.
And what's more here, Stavros, we've had the Iranian authorities come out with a map just a short while ago showing what they consider to be their territorial waters in the Strait of Hormuz, and it is quite a grab here. What do you make of this?
Sorry, I haven't seen the map, and it's difficult for me to
Essentially,
comment on that.
It's from JAZEERA to Al-Quwain, and you can draw a line straight up from there.
Okay, I'm just trying to visualize what you're describing to me. You know, anybody can make any kind of claims. There's, you know, the UNCLOS, the international law, is very clear on what is the territorial waters, what are the rules of navigation, how vessels should be passing through, and all that kind of stuff. So I think if we stick with what is happening in terms, you know, what the norms of the international law is at the moment, that would be extremely useful, so we can help us to de-escalate. I think the biggest problem for me on what I'm seeing here is we need to see some de-escalation, especially for the shipping sector, because as we discussed several times, and I'm sure because I'm following your program, you mentioned it several times that 21 million barrels are passing through the region. And if we want to continue to normality to the global, to the overall region, and start having the de-escalation, I think, you know, vessels shouldn't be considered as bargaining chips, and we should probably try to find a way of de-escalating the overall situation.
We talk about the energy markets, Stavros, a lot, but the thing is, what's happened with the maritime business? Well, how's shipping? It must be also creaking as a consequence of this blockade.
Of course, there are implications. You know, it's like, as I said, 3,000 vessels have been stranded there for 65 days. There is a need for moving cargo from, especially anything that has to do with tankers, with LNGs, because the area was having a lot of energy activity that is taking place. And of course, a lot of those vessels have been trapped there. So the maritime sector is trying to readjust to the new environment. Of course, it's very difficult because, as you can imagine, when an area is providing 20% of the global energy, and of course fertilizers and the rest that several times had been mentioned, is very difficult to substitute. And that's why we see the oil prices going up. And that's why we see that kind of reaction. We have to consider that shipping is covering derived demand. What is the actual thing is, it's the carrier, in a very simple words. So what we're seeing is the need for energy. And of course, vessels are carrying that kind of energy. And of course, that's why they're becoming the bargaining chip.
Stavros Karamperidis, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Associate Professor in Maritime Economics at the University of Plymouth.